All right, good evening, everybody. At this time, if you're able to rise, please do so for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, at this time, I will open up the first hearing and privilege of the floor for 30 minutes. If anybody wishes to address the board, please just state your name, address. You have 5 minutes to talk to the board.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Marlette. I live at 506 Mohawk Avenue. Just a quick recap of what this board, where we are and where this board has been and what we've done. Back in November, we received an email from the business manager that said, hey, we have a $2.8 million budget deficit. We've got to figure this out. Nothing else really came out publicly from that, and I do say the word publicly because I don't know what happens in executive session. You have that. We hear nothing until February 10th when the superintendent and the business manager show up and say, hey, we have a $2.8 million budget deficit. What do you want us to do? The board's answer was stay below cap, cut nothing, and make up for a $2.8 million budget deficit. I like unicorns too. They don't exist, and that's what you asked for. The next month and a half was spent waffling about what we were willing to negotiate and what we weren't willing to negotiate, including nothing. You said nothing was negotiable. It's what kept coming out and coming out and coming out. We wanted to save as much as possible. I agree, we should save as much as possible. I believe in these reading teachers. Option B that was presented last Thursday was presented to you before. It was presented to you as the superintendent's recommendation to go out at the cap. And this group, this body, said absolutely not. We want to go out above cap. And then option A was presented. All option A did was move the cuts from B, from the teachers, to buildings and grounds, and in the internal staff. If I was a member of this internal staff, specifically if I was the business manager, I would hold my breath and pray for the next school year. This option A necessitates sweeping changes to how our district functions. I showed up in February and I gave you 3 options. I laid them out clearly. I put my credentials on the line. Change your health insurance, close a school, look at how you're negotiating salaries. Everybody loves to talk about the superintendent's salary. You approved that. This body approved it. Yes, some of the members were different, but this body approved that. So we all can't point at the superintendent and say, how dare you? Good job, great negotiation skills. But the board approved that. The board's #1 priority is approving salaries and approving hires and approving funding. Don't forget that. You have the privilege of sitting in the executive session. That's a privilege to sit in there. When we don't get a right to know, we pay for what you do in that executive session, and we don't have the privilege of being in there. So remember that the next time you're in executive session. Can this be talked about in front of everyone? Can we go on the record and say this? You should. But backing up to this budget, I stood here in February and I told you, close a school, look at salaries, and look at your health insurance. None of that was done. I was told, as I was reminded, on March 17th, there's going to be a committee for that school closing thing. It's a $2 million savings. Take a look at that. We can close a school in 4 months. I was disappointed that Drew didn't bring that up as option C, because it should have been brought up as option C. This school needs that change. We have too big of a footprint for our low enrollment. It's that simple. But the board is responsible for that. There's a lot of chatter on Facebook, and I'm part of it, about what the board really does and that the board really can't approve things. Yeah, you can. You're elected to do so, so do it. Thank you.
All right, if there's nobody else that would wish to address the board at this time, I'll close the first hearing and privilege of the floor. Remind everybody we will have one at the end of the meeting. At this time, I'll turn it over to Superintendent for her comments.
And Drew and I are going to provide a little information tonight to help you in the next part of your discussion. Revote scenarios that we brought you last week. We called them A and B. Tonight we called them 1 and 2. I think the important thing that you remember is they end up with the same monetary value. They just get there in 2 different ways. We want to answer any questions you might have for us tonight, and then we need you to adopt the spending limit. Because we have got to get our budget newsletter out, we've got to get ballots printed, we've got to get absentee ballots ready to go, and we've got to do that all for a June 17th vote. All righty. So this is scenario 1 and 2, or what were A and B last week, and their impact on the 2025 school tax bill. And again, because this gets us to the levy limit, 3.25, and gets us to the same total, 2 different paths to the exact same number, these numbers will apply whether you chose option A or you chose option B. You see that we get our tax rate increase down to 1.63. It was 3.44 with the budget we went out with. I certainly think that will be more palatable to some in our community. And the percentage increase on spending is about the same at 2.19, so down from where we were. With that, I'm going to ask Drew to come and talk about, and we will work this together, what those reductions that we brought you last week, there seemed to be a little bit of confusion about this, what that looks like.
So option B was what the superintendent had recommended on March 24th and again on the 31st of what to go out slightly under the tax cap. The board respectfully decided to go out over the cap. So we had communicated to the board that there was a short timeline if in fact the budget did not get the supermajority of 60%. Respectfully, the board wanted to wait until after the budget vote to discuss anything, which shortened the timeline. As reiterated or stated last week, internally administration, myself, Susan, Rick, and other administrators worked on what potential we would do with new information, because the budget is a point in time of if we were able to maintain the 3 teachers. And so what was presented Monday was not my recommendation. It was a request to what would it take to cut in other areas to maintain that and go under the tax cap. So it wasn't something that just was slid out there at the spur of the moment. It was weeks of looking at what we would do. And again, when I present something, I don't present it in a panic or trepidation. We will figure things out, but there will be consequences to how we're going to do it. I thought that was made clear.
This is not a case of found money.
No, there was no additional funding because I have shown the board and in each public presentation that our fund balance will be below 1% for the first time in 20 years. The surplus has been impacted by, again, hitting what we've gone over, the prescription cost and the special ed influx of 12 students. I've communicated that in fiscal projections and again in the board budget presentations that we have a hole next year just to get to the fund balance that we use to appropriate in lieu of raising taxes. So with option A, we will basically shift a courier. We won't be doing courier services more than bringing the food deliveries into the schools to help supplement the vacancies that we're not going to fill for cleaning. We already reduced cleaners by 2, grounds by 0.5 in the superintendent's draft, so those stay, but we've even cut deeper. So now what will happen if we have a lot of call-ins, and we will get call-ins, we'll get leave of absences, We'll go to alternate section cleaning, trash, and dash. We will clean the schools, but not the way you see them today. That's the repercussion or the implication of what's up there. Grounds, by reducing by 0.5, you'll basically had a season this year, we're cutting the lawns 3 times because of the rain. That probably won't happen, but I have, with the cooperation of Local 766, changed people's schedules to kind of overlap into the evening to reduce some overtime, but we're cutting that even more. We're cutting the sub-budgets. We're going bare bones on the general support because that's what we're doing to try to support the instruction. But there will be repercussions of this. What they are to the nth degree depends on what kind of weather we have, what kind of call-ins we have, but I don't present this in a panic, or I present a fact that I was asked to look at a way to maintain those 3 teachers, and this is what it's costed out to be, where the hits got to come, where the reductions have to come. Transportation. 2 years ago, we had a over $100,000 a year cost to transport a student to a program in Lebanon, I think it was New Lebanon, Massachusetts. Through the working with Rick's team and my team, we were able to find that the student now had moved to Amsterdam, I believe, and that cost went away. But it can come back. It's a contingency that we carry. We reduced it so that we could free up some funds to cover these costs. These are not locked-in savings. We have to work it. We have to hope we get some fortuitous bounces along the way, but that's what we do. I was also asked during the budget process to look at every contract. We have over, I don't know, Chris, if we got the number, but 300, 400 contracts. We went through every contract, and we got, like SRO, he asked us to meet. We just pulled that one off the other day, so that's 15,000. We maintain both officers. We maintain the trainer. So we followed what the board asked us to do. But if you look at your summary I provided you, the reductions are in general support, building and grounds, and transportation. The increases are in employee benefits, which I've gone over what's happening on the prescription drug. So.
And we want to be clear about the impact at central office of both of the positions that Drew and I have let go. As Drew has said, we are not criers. If this is what you want us to do, we will figure out a way to make it work. It may look different than it does today, but we will make it work. We always have. But for example, I'm going to have a single secretary. At this point in time, my 2 secretaries do dispatch for transportation probably 3 out of 5 days a week, which means they're in early, covering dispatch because everybody at the bus garage is driving. Well, if Ms. Bushman comes in to cover dispatch, I'm sending her home after she puts her 8 hours in, which means district office will technically close a bit earlier in the day. Not because we won't still be there working, but because we won't necessarily have someone manning the doors, and certainly not someone answering the phones. The same is true in Drew's office. Is that the end of the world? Of course not. We have voicemail. We will get to FOIL requests. We will do what we need to do. But I just want people to understand there is an impact in all of these things. But we heard very clearly what your desire and your want was. And that's why we brought you option A last week. It got you to where you wanted to be.
Well, basically, because we didn't have any directive, and it's not a criticism, it's a statement. We had very little time. We needed to bring you what we thought would be something for you to make decisions on. The state deadline is tight. I outlined that formally. So it doesn't give the board a lot of time to make difficult decisions. Again, B was presented to the board. A was a attempt to provide you what the path would be to maintain 3 instructional positions. And this is a contingent budget. Again, that's the showing it, I believe after the superintendent's draft. It will change in proportion, not in totality, if we go with option A rather than B. But I'll have that at the next board meeting once we adopt a spending plan.
Here's that timeline again. Once again, these are the state set dates. They are not flexible. So when I say to you tonight, you really need to adopt our spending cap, whatever it's going to be, we really need to adopt the spending cap tonight. You also know that once we adopt a spending cap and the new budget year begins, there is always movement under that spending cap. This year it was special education and our specialty drugs. Next year it could be something else. We don't know.
You get to approve the numerous budget transfers. That's the freedom to move around the cabin, because a budget is a point in time. It's a plan that the minute we adopt it, it's changed. But we have to operate within the confines of that spending limit and that tax levy limit.
So there are two pieces to tonight. Both option A and option B get us to the same point with the tax levy limit and the budgetary increase, the same spending cap. So that's the primary decision, so we can start our newsletter. Then we need to hear from you about option A, the new option last week, or option B, which you've seen since at least March 10th, correct?
I don't know, 17th or
17th,
24th.
somewhere in there. It all runs together, yes. Okay? Thank you.
Okay. I know we have a bunch of questions, so before I go, I know Kim Furnish, and I talked a lot today, she has some questions, so not to put you on the spot, if you want to go first.
Okay,
I'm
sure.
going to put you on the spot.
No, I appreciate it. I actually do have a lot of questions about option A, because I'm glad we're starting to talk about the consequences. And for myself personally, I wish I had pushed before March 30th to see something like option A, so we knew better the consequences, and I take responsibility for that. That's the responsibility I take. Wish I had known the consequences. So that's what I want to talk about tonight, and I'd like to go line by line to talk about those consequences. And this is all under option A, is what I'm talking about at this point. So for the salary with B&G staff, and you talked a little bit more about the consequences. That was going to be my first question, what that meant. And I know that we're talking about a spending cap and money can move around later, but let's just go by the money that we're taking out of each line now. How much of a cushion do we have by taking this $55,000 out of this particular line? So there's no cushion at all, okay. So then what effect does that have if something happens beyond what you're thinking of sitting here today? We have to then take it from another line.
You take someone off their post, what they're normally doing, and they go fill in that post, and their work doesn't get done. So it's going to be basically managing by priority.
Okay. And you were talking about a courier doing less pickups, and I apologize, I'm not exactly sure who or what this courier is. If you could explain what that is.
Sure, they go to each school, do inter-office mail. They go to the post office for mailings that have to go out. They also serve, I believe, certain things to families. Susan, right? Registered mail.
Correct.
Yes. And then the food deliveries are prominent, because you have to get the food from the, I believe it's the high school, to each of the other schools.
I don't know if anybody do you want to have other people ask? Or you just want me to keep going down the line?
Go right ahead.
Okay.
You might answer somebody else's questions.
Oh, okay. So then looking at the monitors with option A taking off 30, what kind of cushion do we have there taking off that 30?
We won't be calling in any subs, so if we have call-ins, basically then they'll have to reshuffle or do without. That was the cushion.
So what is the effect on the district if we take that $30,000 out for the monitors?
You could be short in a cafeteria, on the playground, but you won't be short at the front desk, because it's a different, they're in the same classification, but that's not where we look for the reduction.
And you said with all of these, you were looking at trends to kind of give you an idea. So was the normal trend of usage less than 30% or 30,000, excuse me, and that's why you reached that number, or was there another reason you reached that number of taking out 30?
Looked at the subs that we call in during the year and basically looked at the trend of that and settled on 30,000 as a reduction of what that could bring back to the bottom line if we didn't call in subs.
Okay. And then going to the administration, you said last week that concessions on certain non-association increases were made. Are you able to talk about what those concessions are?
Superintendent can talk to that.
Drew and I have determined we will take no increases, no cost of living in the 25-26 school year. That's part of the restructuring. Part of that is because I am not interested in losing any more administrative staff here. And despite what Facebook might promote or what people think, we are a pretty lean team and everybody's got more than enough work to do.
And then going to the teaching subs line, you had said earlier, or last week, you had said there was about 450, 500,000. So you looked based, I'm assuming, on the historical trends with that?
We have, I believe, Susan, 2 people we call in every day to float, and we would cut that down to 1.
Correct.
So.
Okay. I've heard, and believe me, I get the rumor mill and all of that. That's why I'm bringing it here about how we seem to have trouble with not having enough subs, partially because of the financial issue. So how would this impact that even further, if at all?
I would say it's more a shortage of subs. We are certainly not the only district who cannot fill their sub requests every day through Camp Reach and BOCES. So that in and of itself is not specific to us. Just like there are shortages in some teacher areas, there are shortages in substitute teacher areas.
Okay, so
and I will credit my principals who do an incredible job of backfilling with teaching assistants or asking someone to take an extra period, which they can do and be compensated for. So they find coverage. In the worst case scenario, a class might end up in a study hall situation rather than having instruction.
So what effects or consequence would you say there would be for removing this amount under the teaching subs?
I don't think there's going to be a significant consequence, Kim, because as Drew and I looked at these numbers, we were also looking at current usage and what we could actually fill. That's a pretty significant budget line to begin with. This is a small contribution to the reductions, but I don't see that as making the difference between being able to get subs or not get subs.
Okay. And then the buildings and grounds and transportation, OT, and subs, you said you had looked at, last week you said you had looked at the historical, but you said we're going lean on that. So can you talk a little bit about the consequences of taking that amount out for the overtime?
Sure. We won't call in day subs. What that'll do is have a building and grounds maintenance mechanic serve as a custodian in the building that day. They're already on staff, but that will impact their work orders to only that building. We instituted that in the latter part of this year because of running out of money. And transportation, the same thing. It's like basically we looked at it. We have more drivers now, not enough, but we have more, so we probably won't need as much overtime.
Okay. And with taking this amount out, is there any sort of cushion at this point, or when you say lean, you're like, there's no cushion?
The cushion that was taken out was on contract transportation, where we have to send a contract bus company with one of our students to a special program. That was cut. That's getting close.
All right. So then it says for central, you're eliminating overtime. Last week you said eliminating overtime and supplementing the help will just have to get by, is what you said. So can you expound on that a little bit, what you mean by that?
People work overtime during budget. People work overtime for other. We have the audit committee just saw today the work that's done for that risk assessment. just have to like prioritize it, and it won't work overtime.
Okay, so are you saying that there's no cushion there either with respect to central office by taking this amount out?
No, there isn't.
And then I want to get to transportation because that's really the biggest number there. You said that mainly has to deal with the outside runs for kids going outside the district. You talked about it a minute ago, but I'd like to get a little more on that. We don't have an internal driver because we just don't have them, so we can usually contract with a company like Brown.
Right. For instance, when we had a student out of state, we couldn't take a driver who's doing in-district runs, sports trips, stuff like that, take him off of that just for one run. So you bid it out, and that's where that line is.
So who are those kids that are going outside the district? That was my first question.
Children with special needs primarily. We do have a requirement to provide transportation to students in our district to parochial and non-publics that are within a 15-mile radius.
So with this, and I know that we have approximately 14 or 15 new children that are going to be needing those kind of services. So it seems like the transportation is actually should be increasing, not decreasing, or am I wrong on that?
They're all at this point going to Capital Region. So we have buses going there for BOCES facilities or Oak Hill or Parsons or Wildwood. We have transportation going there right now. It's if the program exists somewhere we're not going, we try to piggyback with another district. And if that doesn't exist, then we have to bid it out for a contract transportation.
So what does this $150,000 decrease, what effect is that going to have on the district next year if we decide to go that route?
2 years ago we spent $400,000. Now I'm budgeting $187,000. So.
And with that 400, did we use that 400?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
That's why we increased the budget. And then that child moved out. And we found that he was not in district anymore. So we brought it down a little bit. But
okay, so this is another line there's no cushion.
And you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
We could be fined, or we'll be shifting
funds
funds.
now and have it go back, fund balance, or it could be having the budget transfer money in there.
And if we go over, then we got to find it from somewhere else.
Correct.
But we have to pay it because it's by law.
It's the law, so there's no choice. All right, so now the building and ground expenses, that's another high one. You said that the contractor's equipment would be reduced. We'll get by for a year. Can you expound on the consequences for that?
So certain machinery like mowers get replaced. We'll fix them. Even though we have a schedule of useful life, we do look at it and won't replace anything. We'll just fix it. So some things may come offline, so to speak, and if they break down, we have to get them fixed. Newer things typically don't, obviously, but we cut it in half. And if we go contingent, we lose all of it, and we lose all of it. So.
Okay, so this $95,000 is literally cutting that line in half.
Not equipment, but it's combined with B&G, contractual obligations, supplies across the board.
Okay, so if we lose a piece of equipment and there's no way to fix it, if we have to buy that piece of equipment, whatever it is, it's going to have to find some other line to adjust for that.
Correct.
All right, and then for the textbooks, hardware and software, you said you were going to cut some hardware and software, and apologize profusely for that. And I know Smart School money does help with some of that. What hardware and software are we cutting?
I don't want to speak for Megan, but there's a process called TOPS, which administered. Go ahead, Susan.
What was it called? I'm sorry.
TOPS.
TOPS process.
Technology opening picture, whereby teachers and administrators can make requests for things of interest to them in the IT world. Could be software, could be some piece of equipment. And then those are vetted by the lead teachers with Megan, and where we can, we make the purchases if it's in alignment with what we're doing, with our goals, those kinds of things. We just would eliminate that process this coming year.
Is that a pretty significant tool that teachers are using?
Well, I would like to say, I think Rick's Committee on Smart Schools, which met this year, was able to meet several needs that folks are interested in. So while it's not great, and I'm sure there will be something someone wants that, they'll be sad they can't get, we have a lot of new things coming through Smart Schools, new ViewSonic boards for every classroom, so there will be some shift there. And it would not be my intention that went away forever. But again, until we get a little more right-sized budget-wise.
Will there be any effect on the students with their use of Chromebooks
No.
or any of that?
No.
Then with the special ed BOCES tuition, you said that there's one less student. So there was a cushion with that. But between now and then, we could end up with
It's
another
precarious
student.
because, this year we had 12 over budget, so we don't know, but we looked at, I think we try to put aside 3 to 5 students that we don't know about. This reduces that by 1 or 0.5 because a student can go anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, depends on their program.
Okay, so even with this 50,000 cut, we have room for 3 students probably? Okay.
And that's besides the incoming kindergartners that we know about.
The number's always changing as we sit, kids being classified, and they're doing their what do you call it, Susan, right now? They're doing their evaluations in the spring, right?
Yes, we've got lots of CSE, CPSE.
So
reviews.
I don't know the real numbers for a while. It's just a point in time.
Well, that sounds like, based on the fact we don't know the number of students, we need to have some sort of cushion in there.
Well, we know we have 4 graduates, so we basically had 4 spots. Now we've taken one of those spots out, if you will. But as you know from this year, we will do what we've got to do if, in fact, we get extra students.
Right. Okay, and then the BOCES, you said that was actually real savings, so that didn't matter which way we went on that. Professional fees, you said you looked at the historical trend. Those are all the other contracts you were talking about earlier with respect to that. Is there any adverse effect that you can see by reducing this by 11.5?
One of the areas is, as you know, we're in a capital project. We're going to be doing financing for the $12.5 million. So to the extent that the capital fund can't absorb financing fees, it would shift to the general fund, and I just reduced that. So it takes away that cushion or contingency.
So we don't have any cushion with respect to that either?
Nope. What we need to do, the mandated things like our official disclosure and certain updates we have to do with the bond companies.
And the coaches, I know that thank you for doing this. We had subtracted some of the Board of Ed and put it into the coaches. Does that help at all with the cushion?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so where that manifested was we had some sports we couldn't fill this year, but so we didn't incur that expense, but I have to bring that into the budget because they're board authorized sports, and if they have enough participation, those coaches have to get paid. So that's what you kind of do. We give it back, a cushion there in case the sports get filled. So,
Is there any adverse effect on this reduction for this particular line?
no.
So, thank you very much. That cleared a lot of things up in my head.
You're welcome.
So it looks like the biggest concerns, and please correct me if I'm wrong, with respect to option A, is the B&G staff, the B&G overtime and subs, the transportation issues. Is there anything else that is just, we're on a precipice here and this is going to be an issue?
It's a good assessment. That's where most of the proportionate cuts are on those sides. So it's almost like going contingent on the general support side. But
Okay.
we'll just have to hope for good weather. We'll do what we have to do, but it won't get done the same way. It won't look the same, but we'll get it done. It's just
It might not get done as quickly. If we have what we call our maintenance mechanics covering as janitors, they may not get to extra things that people would like them to do, perhaps in terms of moving something in their classroom, rewiring something quite as quickly. But as Drew and I have said, we're going to make work whatever we get. We always have, we always will. Is it going to be perfect? No, but I would venture it hasn't been perfect.
It may buy us a year.
Well, yeah, this is definitely a Band-Aid. I mean, as soon as I saw it, this, to me personally, I'm speaking for myself, this looked like a massive, huge Band-Aid that's barely covering the edges. So I recognize that.
So the point I want to emphasize is that with declining enrollment, the footprint of the district hasn't changed. So we have the same building square footage to maintain in the same fields. So that lives a different life than the enrollment impact on the district. So as long as the footprint's the same, we have the same responsibilities, and we're decreasing that support for it.
Sure.
So,
going to the reading teachers and the librarian line, I know that we're talking about positions, not people, and the intent was to move those people to other elementary school positions. Am I correct on that? Are these elementary school positions that we have to have, or
Yes.
is there a way to combine?
No,
I'm just.
they're classroom positions, and we've gone through the, or I should say the principals have gone through the initial hiring process so that we can be ready to move forward on those hires, because since those folks didn't move into a classroom, we have to hire. And Drew, going back to Drew's point about the footprint of the buildings, as long as we're running 4 elementary schools and classes at 12, 15, except at Sacandago, where they tend to be more typically sized, we have to replace those elementary teachers.
Okay. Because I didn't know, and it's like it's not true that if we say had 3 classes, I'm using random numbers, totally not real numbers, of like 14, 14, and 14, we could take away one of the 14s and divide it between the last 2. That's not something that can happen with any
Not
of these
easily
positions.
because of the attendance boundaries. So for example, SAC sections are typically within or very close to the guidelines that the board has set. Lincoln's, Glendale's, and Glenwarden's tend to run smaller. If you were going to simply say, I'll take these students and move them here, that then becomes a transportation expense, potentially moving other staff around expense. So until we actually can have that discussion about what do we want to look like in 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years, moving students short term to achieve more balance isn't very realistic. I would also say the principals have been very clear with me, as I look at Mr. Giannetti, but all 4 of the elementary principals, they don't want to move kids next year if we really are serious about a realignment the following year, because then those children will move twice. And none of us is interested in that. What we have talked about is, given the very small enrollment at kindergarten right now, 132, SAC has 2 full sections, plus they will pick up any English as a new language learners who might register, because that's where those services are. But the other 3 elementaries have less robust sections, so there might be a way to shift some incoming K students who don't have current siblings in the district to a different building for kindergarten, and potentially collapse 1, maybe 2 sections that way. But that all remains to be seen. I think I had shared with you in my update on Friday that we have 7 K students requesting placement in schools other than their own home schools. We're holding on all of that right now till we see if the K numbers come up at all.
And when I say this next piece, please know I'm plan on, for myself, sitting here until we figure out what to do, so you guys have your plan to go on. I'm not trying to delay anything at all. but I had a thought that it doesn't necessarily have to be a package deal with the 2 reading teachers and the librarian. If maybe we can determine if there's 1 or 2 that we think maybe we can lose without sacrificing the things that we think are important, but then utilize that money towards some of these lines where there's no cushion. For example, correct me if I'm wrong, the librarian is about $100,000. Is that correct?
About 300,000 in staffing. 294, Drew, is that the number that you prefer?
All right, so whatever it would be $100,000. Maybe that's something, and I say this to the entire board, that's something that maybe we look into to figure out a good compromise so we can bring back some of the money in these other areas where it seems like we're really riding that line that I'm not sure we want to ride. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Can I go next?
Sure.
Okay, since I have very few meetings left and I want to just use my time wisely. Is it a given that there will be a building that will be repurposed or closed in the near future? Is that a certainty?
Well, I think that's the board's decision. I don't, as your superintendent, I don't see how we can't do that.
Okay.
But I don't know what you folks see, so I'm not speaking for you, but I am telling you when we're bringing in 132 kindergartners, when we used to bring two or 210, I don't think it is fiscally responsible to continue to have 4 schools open. And
Right.
yes, you know I am more interested in repurposing.
Right. It just because I think it makes a difference if we would go with one of these options for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. But that I think for me it matters in my calculations and my thinking, especially with the reading teachers in the library. And I know that we were preserving the people by moving them, but then it would eliminate those jobs, right? But so if we kept all of them, if we had those positions, and then you still had to fill those other jobs, and then in the future we're now closing a building or repurposing a building, we've hired these 3 new people that then would not have jobs, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The $15,000 for the resource officer, that came from the town of Glenville, is that correct?
Correct.
So is that conditional, are they committed to providing that money regardless of which option we choose? Or is it only if we go with option A?
1 year. I said that last meeting that they gave us 1 year, $15,000 one-time reduction.
So it could go on either, it would go on both
Correct.
columns? Okay. All right, that was my main question for now. Thank you for letting me barge in.
No, absolutely. Again, Chad, I want to thank you for sending me the doc while I was out of town last week so I could dive into it when I got back. I'll say my 2 cents, then we can chat, and then I'll talk again. To me, option A has a lot of potholes in it. It doesn't leave us any what-if scenario type things. If something were to happen, we can be as silly as to say, we've had 10 days of rain in a row and our fields are 4 feet tall, but yet we have nobody to go and mow them. I get it might be a silly thing, but we don't have any room there. Option A just concerns me quite a bit with the what ifs because we don't have Drew's crystal ball to look at all the time. And on that note that Emily had asked, just so we're all clear, because I know we've mentioned it a couple of times before, but I still think we were a little unsure about it. We keep the 2 reading teachers and librarians, and then we still have to go out and hire 3 more people.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
And then
Right.
we'll lay off 6 next
Right.
time.
And we're paying for those 3 people by doing these things in option A.
Correct. Right. And to segue quick, Amy, just so this is the first year that I've been on the board that we've actually had public support about having a conversation about a school. Because in years past, when it's been brought up, there's been rocks and things thrown at me. So this has been the first year that we've actually had people in the community talk to us about it. So thank you. We have this tough decision, but like I said, looking at this quick and then re-examining it and then watching the meeting today and chatting with some of the group, to me, option A has way too many what ifs. We're cutting $168,730 out of building and grounds. we're cutting $150,000 from transportations, where half of that is mandated that we're required to do that. Where are we going to get that money to do that? That's all I got for now.
I have a question, yeah. So, Drew, I may be following, seeing this or reading this, and I'm trying to quick math here. SRO is $15,000 from the town of Glenville in option A, but B is not there. Can it not be in B? Can be, right? And even the special ed BOCES tuition?
Can go, I was just
Either way.
showing what the superintendent's draft was, having nothing else to go on, to what has transpired to try to maintain 3 instructional staff. So the SRO just came to fruition last Thursday, I communicated it. So,
I think it's just saying, you put 0 under
yeah,
B.
because it wasn't in the
because it wasn't the original.
It wasn't in there,
Gotcha.
so I was just trying to give you
That's
something.
But it'd be
Understood,
That's
understood.
fine. So
But
let's
it's
say
there.
we put the board money into B, we put the BOCES into B, and the SRO at $69,000, right? And we put that into, and I hate reducing teachers or librarian or anything, we put that into that category with 2 reading teachers and the 1 librarian. Would that help in any way? Maybe 1 reading teacher instead of 2? No.
Depends who the teacher is, but, I mean,
So, at the risk of sounding like I'm a teacher, because I know that drives people crazy, everybody's with me that we're going to end up at 614,964. That's what we're going to ask you to adopt tonight. That is our spending cap. So we're not talking about option A or option B per se. We're talking about the amount of money when we talk about the spending cap. We can certainly continue to have a discussion about should we not perhaps do that or should we do this. But honestly, folks, you've seen B and you rejected it. And that's not said with attitude, it's just a fact. I brought you B. You didn't like it because you wanted to maintain the teachers. I respect that. I truly, truly do. If that is still your driving motivation, then we would start with A as our spending plan, understanding that we're going to hit some potentially bumps in the road. But it gets you what you were determined to have initially. And frankly, I want you to have what you were determined to have. If that is what you think is best for the children in the district, that's your job as a board to decide. That's the thing we want. This discussion, whether you go B or A, my guess is Drew will be moving money under the cap as we do every year, no matter what else happens. Is that a safe thing to say? We will not have a line item budget that we don't ever change, regardless of these 2 options. We're going to
things change.
Changes change.
Budget changes as soon as you adopt it.
Yep, as you said. So while I appreciate you trying to help in this way, I'm not sure that's the problem to solve tonight. Does that make sense?
So
We've been included initially. You guys said last week, rolled out the budget, and you guys started on option A. We could have been included in that conversation where we could have made, okay, if we're looking at enrollment, and I personally feel an elementary will have to be closed, then we could have had the foresight there to go ahead and fold in librarian. That's my frustration, is we weren't included in that. So now you're getting the conversation because we're trying to adjust things as we go, because as Hal said, we're seeing potholes in it. I'm hearing from Drew that this is by our hair. But that's the frustration. Why weren't we included on the discussion on that?
I asked you to have a discussion with me before we voted.
What's that?
Before we voted, I said to the board, it was on the agenda, we should have a discussion about what we're going to do if the budget doesn't pass. And the board chose not to do that. You told me you didn't want to have that discussion. Now, were we already working on it? Yes, we were. But I do believe it was an agenda item, and the meeting we were going to talk about that, which was the Monday before the budget vote, folks were not interested in having that conversation.
And you know the reason that we didn't want to have that conversation so that we could maintain the focus on what we're pushing out to the community. Now, there's nothing to say that we could have had an email or we could have had something where we could have discussed it. That's where I'm frustrated right now. We're saying, well, we don't want our input, but you're saying up here, this is on us. So I very much would like input. Now, because I want to maintain focus in that moment, you can't hold fault with that. So
No, please, Chad, don't misunderstand. I'm not holding anybody at fault. I am simply saying there's a timeline we've got to hit it.
Absolutely. We got
And
plenty of time.
we have brought you our best thinking. And the piece you're going to work on tonight, adopt tonight, is the spending cap. We can certainly talk about moving people around as much as people would like, or moving positions around. But until we have a passed budget, I don't know how much further we can go.
I mean, I understand that.
Then we're saying the same thing, Chad.
I guess I'm a little confused then, because I thought at the beginning of this discussion, you had said we have two things to figure out tonight. One, are we going to do the 614? And two, is that going to be option A or option B? That's why I brought out maybe there's a C. I agree with the 614, but maybe there's a C. But are you now saying that really all we need to do tonight is the 614? Not that I don't want to push anything down. I do think we need to have this discussion, but are you now saying that really it's the 614 you're concerned about? It's not the option A, B, or C, 12?
Well, of course I am concerned about what the board would like. Absolutely, which is why we brought you an option A, because it was pretty clear to Drew and I that maintaining those three positions was important to the board. That was the choice you made to go out above the cap. We can stay here and discuss this as long as you would like, but at some level, Kim, yes, what you hear me saying is we got to land on this number 614, so we got to start a budget newsletter tomorrow. So whatever the board's pleasure is, we will do.
Well, I know people have said, Amy mentioned it, you mentioned it, that, well, we've already seen this on 314. We've never, this directly, like this line item like this, we have not seen this. I don't have it in.
If I could jump in.
That's right.
Is that okay to jump in?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
This A came together probably Thursday when I finished. It's going through all this stuff just as a cost of how it would happen. Mm-hmm. It's not, as Chaz had said and Kim identified, there's potholes in this. But it's a way to do it and then manage it, and hopefully it works out. But it's not anything that strategically was planned. We gave you through 10 to 12 weeks of budget presentations where we are, where we're going, how we got there, and with your input. But you asked the superintendent to arrive at a budget that maintained all program and stayed under the cap. Am I correct? Yes. So we did that. Option A is just giving you the pathway if you want to maintain that $290,000. It's not a scientific 12-week, 23-month work. It's like the budget went down, wanted to give you the option of how you could see a pathway, what it would take. And it comes on the general support, B&G transportation side. It's the only way to get there without touching program. So we have involved the board since February 10th.
Right, and I agree with you. And all I'm saying for me, I'm a detail guy, right? So
this didn't exist, as I said. It didn't exist. It's something that was working on with for 3 weeks, and it didn't come together until probably Thursday morning when I pulled over at Dunkin' Donuts and called Susan on my way to work. I think I've got where we can maybe do this without touching staff. It's not scientific that way. There are potholes. Things will get pushed. Things won't get done. But at the end, that's the only gateway that I see based on the funding that we have, and not creating a worse hole than we're already facing for next year, which is my job. And I've shown you that for 15 years, tax cap years, we spent under 2%. We've had 1.5% tax rates. We've had fiscal integrity. But now the state has dried up the funding and it isn't coming back. You've heard me say that we were fully funded. It was only through the legislative act of last year and this year that the hold harmless gave us 2%. We weren't even entitled to that under the formula at 600,000. Then where would we be? So the news isn't good. I understand that, but it's been presented, and this wasn't some option that sits out there in the sand that we just were holding on to. This came about through weeks and weeks, and then came together with some thoughts of like, how can we do this? Give the board an option. That's all this is an option.
Right, and that's why I said earlier today that I wish I had thought to ask for something like this before March 30th as to what the consequence of keeping 2 reading teachers and a librarian and trying to stay at the cap. And that's something I take full responsibility for not doing. I wish I had asked that question.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, Drew, I don't think you're very crystal clear with us in my time here. I don't think you held this under your pillow just to show us if the board budget went down. I was just simply asking that these individual line items that on 317, this exact thing, we weren't shown. If we had seen, if I personally, I'll speak for myself, had seen that we're going to cut this out of this and this out of this, we saw the whole line group number, but we didn't see what was underneath it. So maybe in the future that might help us. As Chad was saying, that's maybe where some of the frustration is we saw we're going to lose 200,000, but what the heck is in that 200,000?
Yeah, the consequences.
And not to get nitpicky, but right.
Yeah,
I did answer every question last week,
absolutely.
and I've answered every question
Right.
since February
Yeah.
and to public forums. So
Right.
whatever you want to ask me is fine. I don't hold back. I tell the truth. I'm not smart enough to make up the truth.
I don't think that's what Hal was saying. I'm definitely not saying that.
He's
I'm
one
saying
second.
I didn't.
Like, what does 200,000 look like if it broken down like this? So we know like something's coming from ground, something's coming from admins. Is what I think they're saying. They just want to know where this at. Like this is great because now we can look at it and we can see what holes we have.
But this came together after the budget went down
Right,
as
that's
far
what
as
I'm
the
saying. Like
formality.
this is something that shows us where the potholes are.
Whatever you want, we can deliver to show it to you, whatever way you want. But we have to know where you want us to go, because there's a million ways to go, as you know, right?
That's what I was saying.
Okay, thank you.
And this has a million ways it's going to go. 614.
I think a big part of what we're facing right now is simply the fact that this budget went down.
I'm sorry, Pam.
The fact that the budget went down.
Yes.
We really believed that we were putting out the very best budget to keep everything we could and give the kids everything they needed. And the community said no. So we're suddenly stuck with the position of saying, how can we, to get to the cap, get rid of $600,000? We didn't have to worry about getting rid of $600,000 if this budget had passed. We'd be giving everybody everything we felt they needed. But we don't have that option anymore. So Drew and Susan went back and said, where can we get this money that we now have to get rid of? And guys, if you don't like this, if this budget goes down and we have to go to a contingent budget, you are going to hate it. This is nothing in cuts compared to what we have to do if we go to a contingent budget.
And we've seen that, we've heard that, and that's not our goal. But our goal was to ask questions about this tonight, since the people that elect us asked, well, where the heck did this budget come from?
Right,
So
and there's
that's
nothing
what
wrong with
we're
us
just
asking those questions
Correct.
at this point.
Right.
But we can't say, why didn't we know this before?
don't think we
Because
did.
there wasn't a need to know it before.
I disagree with that, though. And again, I'm putting it on myself because I think if we could have shown option A, if I had thought to ask for what are the consequences if we do it at the cap, I think it would have been good to show the public, this is why we're coming to you with 5%. But again, that's a question I didn't ask. I didn't ask for this. So, but we're here now and we have to figure out what we're going to do. So I don't know, is the first thing we should do is, right now, is deal with the 614 and then we can have further discussions on the other, because I don't want our people doing enough hard work on this. I don't want them to be worrying about getting even more behind the gun.
You could go back to the agenda. and then work your way through the rest of the things on the agenda. And then adopt the spending cap, and then at the end, come back and discuss this further if you'd like.
Well, we have to also provide to the public by law a line item budget shortly thereafter.
Correct.
So we have to show, as which I've done to the board, I've shown you both line items. If the budget passes, you can then make decisions to reallocate, move within the cabin, so to speak. That's the fortuitous balance. If you pass a budget, you have room to reallocate and maneuver. Contingent budget, you don't. You're limited to how you can transfer money within contingent expenses.
Can you say that louder and make sure people, because I did not know that, so that's good to know.
Well, you know the contingent budget keeps you in certain proportions by
Right.
law, and that also limits your budget transfers must keep you in the same proportion. So you just can't take
So we're
it.
not going to be able to have that movement like we would
You
if we
couldn't go
got
from
this
B&G
budget.
to program or vice versa.
Okay.
It would upset the apple cart.
And those are movements that you bring to us and we vote on.
Correct. Drew said that much more eloquently than I did.
All right, is there any more questions on A or B?
I guess I basically feel at this point that the only decision we have to make is whether we're going to go and keep the teachers and the librarian or not keep the teachers and the librarian. Same amount of money that we're going out with, but the public needs to know, are we going to have these 2 teachers and the librarian that we had tried to get before, or are we going to give them up? Because the amount of money is the same. You know, Drew can switch the money as he needs to in budget transfers at this point if this budget passes. And if we find that we're cutting ourselves too closely in one spot, we can take it from someplace else.
Correct.
But the public has to know whether or not we are keeping the teachers and the librarian.
That's my concern here, where I'm leaning more toward option A, where in the foreground, where I think Rick shows a plan of 3 or 4 days, one school will have a teacher, or one day, whatever that plan was. The kid's gonna feel it, the teacher's gonna feel it, you see it up front when you walk into the school. Where in option A, it's hard to say, it hurt more the background, where people don't see it. Hurt Susan, hurt Drew, or first straight on Jill, cutting the grass, this not getting done, that's not getting done, but that's more background work where money can be shifted around here and there, hopefully. But losing these teachers, my view, again, that's something that you'll see right away. When the kid comes home and says, I can't get a book today because the library was closed. Well, that's my opinion, my view on it, so.
What I'm hearing in option A is, if keeping those, we still need to hire three more teachers.
Correct.
So,
Who are in the budget.
who are in the budget.
So it's not an increase.
So we won't be decreasing them. We will be decreasing next year.
Well, what I'm saying is, it's not 614 plus 3 more teachers. We've accounted for the 3 teachers in the budget.
So what's the timeline here? We're approving the spending cap tonight, and we are or are not making a decision about A and B tonight.
It would be helpful if you could reach a decision,
Okay.
because we'd
Right.
like to
I feel
get
like I'm hearing
accurate
different things.
information in the budget
Okay.
newsletter.
Okay. Well, I would only be comfortable with option A if it was if we could guarantee it was for a limited time, for 1 year only. And that we would take action toward doing something with a building. Because we can't just, this isn't sustainable. I don't think option A is sustainable.
There's my understanding, we're gonna make it 1 year and reevaluate next year.
Reevaluate though, but I think we have to have a plan. We've been talking about repurposing a building since my first year on the board, and then we just never had a conversation. And I'm afraid of that happening again, that we'll be sitting here in a year and saying, well, what if we had a plan to close a school already? And then what if we don't have one?
Well, Emily, I will assure you, as soon as we have a budget in place, we will have a committee that's going to start working on all of these questions, from who loses their mascot, to redrawing attendance boundaries, to making sure school zones are balanced economically, etc. Because we can do this coming year.
Right.
But you're right. This is not a sustainable unless we're going to start going out to the community with much higher tax rates.
And we saw we can't do that.
Correct.
Okay, so at this point, are we ready to go around the room and talk about option A and B? And then when we get to agenda item number 6, we will.
Adopt the spending cap.
Right, adopt the spending cap.
Can we also talk about like a potential C? I mean, I think doing a C is an option as well. It doesn't have to be 2 reading teachers and a librarian. Maybe that's the compromise that needs to happen in order to have more of a cushion in other areas. Or it doesn't, but I'm putting it out there.
Okay, so why don't you just see if people can land on A or B to get us a start?
Okay. Pam?
A.
Kim Furnish?
B.
Kim Talbot?
B, with fluency.
Chad?
A.
Emily?
B,
Margette?
A.
I'm going to go with option B. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4 for B, and 3 for A. Okay.
and that can lead us to talk about us, so we're going to be fluid with the money.
Correct. Once it's approved, then we can, right, like Drew's done for 15 years, move the money around to where it's needed. All right, any more discussion on that before we move on? All right, if I can get a motion, please, to accept the report of the inspectors of budget and election.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the report of inspectors and budget vote and election.
Thanks, Chad. And a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Roger. Anyone have any questions or comments? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? So moved.
It's mine.
You don't have to. And congratulations to Kim Talbot and Mike Torelli. All right. Can I get a motion, please, for item number 6, the approval of the budget revote and final adoption for 25-26 with spending cap?
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of a budget revote and final adoption of 2025-2026 budget.
Thanks, Chad. A second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Emily. Any other questions or on this? Comments?
So are we strictly voting now on the amount of money, or are we voting on whether we're doing A or B?
Amount.
You're not going to vote on A or B, you're just voting on the spending cap.
The dollar amount. Good question, Pam. Thank you. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed
Opposed?
or abstain? All right, so moved. If I get a motion, please, to accept the property tax report card for 25-26 school year.
I'll make a motion for the property tax report card for the 25-26 school year. Submitted.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thanks, Chad. Questions, comments on this? All right, if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? So moved. If I get a motion on, we can move resolutions if we choose, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12.
I move to accept and appropriate the gift and donation from the Ronald McDonald House Charities, from the Second Dagger Elementary School PTA, and the donation list for the additional high school award scholarships, the gift and donation from Mary Beth Sullivan, and the gift and donation from Virginia McCarthy, all with thanks.
Thank you, Kim. A second?
Second.
Thanks, Jen. Anyone have any questions on this or comments? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstained? So moved with thanks. Any motion for communications, please?
Move communications A and B, staffing 1 through 9, and the placement of students with disabilities.
Hal, I need to abstain on 4.
On 4, okay.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Jen. And a second.
I'll second.
Thanks, Kim. Anyone have any questions or comments on that?
Susan, could you talk a little bit about the need for the business teacher?
Actually, I'm going to defer to Mr. Arquette and ask him. He's been leading the charge with the business teacher hire.
Yeah, so we had a business teacher retirement this year, and we, as an admin team, met to determine whether or not we wanted to fill that position or access another secondary special area. And we decided, because we found a very high-quality candidate, to hire the business candidate, which will have the result of us cutting a long-term sub who's in a fax position at the middle school.
Thank you.
So that'll give us 2 business teachers and 2 family and consumer science teachers. It will not result in the elimination of any program. It will probably result in the elimination of classes that have less than 10 students or otherwise under-enrolled. And potentially we will shift at least 1, maybe 2 of the family and consumer science classes over to technology, because we have someone there with the certification who could teach.
Good. So there's a tech teacher who also has that certification as well. Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstained? Chad abstains on 14-4.
Yep.
Thank you. Any questions on the treasurer report for April 2025? We'll move on to other business. I know the board gets this lovely magazine every month. Mike, I know it's something you're looking forward to every week to look at. This month, however, I thought there was 2 good articles in it. I told Susan about it on page 9. It has to do with communications, with social media and how the school district could do way better into touching base and creating common bonds with our community. Susan says she gets it, she already read it. And then for Pam and Kimmy on page 17, it has to do with policy and the summer's here and what policies to look at all year round. So if you guys have it, if not, I'll give it to you about page 17. You should look at it as well.
You have that, right?
I have.
Thank you. That's all I have for other business.
Speaking of Mike, we were talking about the mentor last time.
Yes.
It's getting near June. When
Yep,
we expect to reach out.
Yeah, we can chat about it.
Okay.
Yep.
We can put that on the agenda for the night for conversation. And Pam, I think I said something that was perhaps confusing. As we prep for the budget revote, we will be talking about what's under B.
Anyone have any other business?
I just want to bring up the idea of the waiver again. I'm not exactly sure what we need to do as a board, but probably.
As it turns out, board members can't do that, so we will be pursuing that, Drew and I.
Oh, great.
Through
Thank
the
you.
district, as soon as we get a sense of what it is we need to do.
All right. Oops, sorry. go ahead.
Sorry.
No.
Covers the budget passed, and I think in the budget it says about cell phones. We started looking into that already, or I know we were doing a committee, right?
Yeah, we surveyed
Yeah,
believe.
We surveyed students, parents, faculty. We had a cell phone task force that was putting together a recommendation. I'm meeting with principals next week to look at that recommendation, bring a final recommendation to Susan, and some draft policy language that will present, I believe, at the June 27th board meeting, because each district has to have a policy in place by August 1st.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Anything else? All right, no other business, then I will open up the second hearing and privilege of the floor for 30 minutes. Remind everybody, if anyone would like to address the board, please just state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name's Justin Cook. I live at 149 North Toll. I'm here as a parent. And I have to say, I think like most of the community, there was a little bit of shock and disappointment when the original budget that went out wasn't passed. And I want to just thank each and every one of you around the table having the difficult discussions that I don't think a lot of the parents who rely on the school district and our kids who rely on the school district necessarily wanted to have. And it's to choose between this and not that but not this is never something easy to decide. But one of the things, as you continue to have these conversations, when you look at things, the key performance indicators that I think school districts look at, that parents look at, is success and opportunity for their kids. It's the graduation rate. Who's going to go to the next step of their career, whether it be a trade school, community college, a four-year school, or an Ivy League? All the students have to have that pathway to graduation. And the thing that I want to encourage the board as you continue to have these discussions is also think about the programs that students and parents rely on. My daughter was first grade when the pandemic hit. And you could immediately tell that virtual school was not for her. She lost about a year of her educational development from the pandemic. I think the small class sizes, as well as the incredible teachers at Lincoln Elementary School, have been a saving grace to my daughter's education. She's relied on Learning Leaps. And I don't know if option B, if Learning Leaps is preserved, which I'm glad it is, because it's those support programs that start school maybe a little bit earlier than the fall in a fun and exciting way that actually help my daughter catch up. Reading teachers are not classroom teachers. And it's important to know that when students get pulled out for reading help, reading support, reading comprehension was something my daughter struggled with a lot. It was reading teachers that helped her get back on track. And even in the middle school, she still struggles with the anxiety of the iReady scores for both English as well as math. And this is going to be a struggle that she probably has straight through to graduation day. But the decisions that we make, that you make, and the decisions that we make as a community, these are going to impact their future. It's going to impact their mental health. Because school stress, no student likes to come home and show a bad report card to their parent. And most of the time, it's a bad report card because they're struggling with something. They're struggling to get that concept. They need the extra help. And the more and more financial stress that this district is under, the harder it's going to be to provide those services. So I went to school for music education. I was a specialty teacher. But I also recognize that teaching choir, my students need to know how to read. My students need to know how to count. They need to be able to understand fractions. So while arts and sports are important, they're great drivers of self-esteem as well as confidence and builds those student leadership skills. We can't lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, reading, writing, math, all these filter into sports, all these filter into music. And at all costs, I just hope that these programs are here to stay. And I hope that we as a community can actually rally around the support of the school district to make sure that these needs are met. And we can point blame games and carry on Facebook, but at the end of the day, those Facebook comments are a child's education. And our kids are looking to us and to our community on how we handle ourselves in these moments, how we face these big challenges. And I'm a huge Teddy Roosevelt fan, and when I first started kind of getting involved in public life, I was always called to the man in the arena quote. And that I'd rather have and be gracious and thankful for the people who are willing to step into the arena, to go through the difficult time of making these decisions, knowing that at the end of the day, the decisions will be made and our kids will benefit. And I look forward to the careful, thoughtful, deliberate discussion of what it looks like going forward with terms of class sizes and repurposing schools. I think we're long overdue for universal pre-K. We are in a childcare desert, and if there's any way to increase enrollment and possibly state aid, it's through that. And it's constructive steps moving forward for the betterment of our education with that graduation rate, that pathway to a career, and that pathway to the success to be the guiding light and the guiding principle behind all our decisions. So thank you for your service and thank you for your time. And I look forward to making sure that this budget passes, because whether it's A or whether it's B, it's a heck of a lot better than the contingency, which would be devastating.
The board at this time, we will close the second hearing and privilege of the floor and ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thanks, Kim. A second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Or abstained? So moved. Thank you.